Plastic production has ramped up so much in the past 50 to 70 years. It's literally inside of our organs, our tissues, our brains, can lead to things like infertility, disease, cancer. And those chemicals that are used to make plastics, as I'm learning from the experts, are big time.
I could feel myself cringing.
Vicky Nguyen.
Vicky Nguyen, making news right now.
NBC's Vicky Nguyen.
Vicky Nguyen. I'm Vicky Nguyen. NBC News Daily starts right now.
Vicky Nguyen is an award-winning journalist and investigative reporter for NBC News. She's exposed deceptive business practices, hidden dangers in everyday products, and financial scams that put consumers at risk.
We got an anonymous tip that Cisco was storing food in outside sheds. We did a series of reporting. It involved hidden cameras. It involved undercover reporting.
Beyond her investigative work, Vicky's own story is one of resilience. Born in Vietnam before coming to America, she is one of the boat babies.
What does it mean to be a boat baby?
About 2 million people escaped Vietnam because they were on the losing side of the war, often in the cover of night and almost always by boat. People would slip away and you just wouldn't see them or hear from them and you wouldn't know what happened to them. Months or years later, they would pop up and say, I made it to America. It all starts with me as a baby and this decision that my parents made.
Why do you think this book is important for others?
We live in the United States of America, and I think the fabric of what makes our country great and strong is...
That experience gave her a first-hand understanding of hardship and perseverance, driving her passion for uncovering the truth and giving a voice to those who are often overlooked. The Icon's a show where we learn life lessons from those who may shape the icon in each of us. And today we explore life, how we got where we are, and where we go next. Vicky Nguyen, welcome to the show.
Vicky, how do you describe the work that you do and why you do it?
Well, my title is Chief Consumer Investigative Correspondent and Anchor at NBC News. And the long and short of it is my job as a journalist is to provide information that helps my audience make smarter decisions, be healthier, be wealthier, and be safer. And so I take great pride in what I think of as very much a public service job. I go and research information. I talk to subject matter experts, and then I try to digest and distill that information into news that people can use.
I feel like everyone listening just sat up, their ears just perked up when you talk about, health, wealth, relationships. I mean, those big buckets of life. It just feels like that's so universal for all of us. And when I was researching your story, one of the things that really jumped out to me was this idea that you research fascinating stories and you've lived this fascinating story. And oftentimes you're kind of on the camera side, but it's great to ask you questions about your story. What would you say are the most consequential things that have brought you here to this seat?
I think it's a series of small things. And whether it's journalism or business or any other industry, it's what you do today and today and today that leads you to your big tomorrow. I never dreamed this big. I never thought I would be working regularly for the Today Show or for nightly news. I just took the job I had at hand and tried to do the best that I could with that job in that moment. I can tell you, I think the most consequential thing that happened to me in getting me to the network from local news was a series of investigative reports that I did on Cisco. This is a huge multi-billion-dollar food service company. And we had gotten an anonymous tip when I was working at NBC Bay Area. This is in the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose market of California. We'd gotten an anonymous tip that Cisco was storing food in outside sheds. These are sheds, mind you, where the rules themselves say you can't store perishable goods or food. And yet milk, meat, all kinds of perishable food was being stored outside in hot temperatures in these outdoor sheds. Very much a food safety violation. It was actually against the law to store food this way. So we did a series of reporting. It involved hidden cameras. It involved undercover reporting. It involved confronting people, tailing cars to see where this food ended up. But it was that series of reports that caught the attention of the investigative producers at NBC News, the network. And so I think when they saw that, it put me on their radar. But it wouldn't be for another few years until a position actually became available at the network for me. So I would say that that's how life works. You can't really see the dots and connect them going forward. I think Steve Jobs talked about that. But when you look back and you go, oh, all those early mornings, all those long hours, all those days we put in working our tails off for this one series of reports resulted in a door opening that eventually led me to the network. So that was very consequential in my career.
How about from a life perspective? I mean, a couple of things that like really jumped out to me there. One was today and today and today that leads you to your big tomorrow. I think, if more of us could just take that to heart and recognize that there will be steps and they'll be small at times and they'll feel like they're not going someplace at time, but they open the door. And from a work perspective, it's cool to hear you talk about kind of the story that like planted the seed. How about life? Was there any life seeds that were planted for you that were really important?
I love this question so much, and you forced me to kind of look back and reflect. But in my book, Boat Baby, I talk about being 11 years old and going back for the first time to Vietnam. That's the country where I was born, and I had never been there. And there were cousins and aunts and uncles and two of my grandmas who were still alive, people I had never met because my parents escaped the country when I was 8 months old. And we, were sponsored to the United States, but I'd never gone back. So in 6th grade, my parents decided to take me back so I could meet all of our extended family. And I remember thinking, this is incredible. These people who love me so much, even though they don't know me, these people who look just like me, but have had wildly different life experiences, especially meeting my cousins who are around my same age. It really opened up my eyes to what my life might have been like had my parents stayed in Vietnam and not made the biggest sacrifice and biggest risk of their life to flee. And I think that 2-week trip made me realize how fortunate I was to be living in America, to have access to education, to have simple things like fast food when I wanted, video games, unlimited toys, running water. That was something that, my relatives in one of the villages I visited didn't have running water. We didn't have like modern plumbing. So I just came back to America, and I remember thinking to myself as a kid, a 6th grader, I got to make the most of my opportunities. I got to make the most of my life. Like, I can't take anything for granted. I'm sure I didn't even say it in those words. It was just a feeling that I had. And it wasn't because my cousins were unhappy or they knew what they were missing out on. It was just more a recognition that like my cousins probably weren't going to get much of an education, maybe middle school, maybe high school. I only had one cousin who had gone to any kind of college or university. And most of them were living very simple lives. But I knew that being an American meant that I had access to anything. And I look back and think, only in America can a boat baby refugee become a national news correspondent and anchor in one generation. I do think our country is very special. I do think it is the land of opportunity. I understand why my parents made all these sacrifices and took huge risks to get us here. And so I think that trip at 11 years old really opened my eyes to what my life might have been like. And it made me really appreciate the opportunities that I had and the sacrifices my parents made. And I think I just really sort of started attacking life that way and thinking, well, I better make the most of this because you only get one life, and I've got a really blessed one.
Attacking life. Love that. Congratulations on your book, Boat Baby. Just out now. When I read the title of that, even just the title, I had so many feelings come to me in terms of like what that must mean or what that must be like. But maybe we'll start with, what does it mean to be a boat baby?
So the term boat people was assigned to the roughly 2 million people between 1975, the fall of Saigon on April 30th, to about 1992. About 2 million people left Vietnam, escaped Vietnam, because they were on the losing side of the war. They were part of South Vietnam. They didn't want to be a part of the North Vietnamese communist government. They didn't want to live under a communist government. And so often in the cover of night, and almost always by boat, people would slip away and you just wouldn't see them or hear from them, and you wouldn't know what happened to them until maybe, months or years later, they would pop up and say, I made it to America or Canada or Australia or France, any of the countries that were willing to sponsor refugees at that time from Vietnam. And because I was only 8 months old when my parents made that harrowing journey, when I was talking about my story, I think it was actually my book agent who said, so you were a boat baby. And then when we started thinking about it, that was the working title for the book, because it all starts there. It all starts with me as a baby and this decision that my parents made. And then Boat Baby just sort of stuck because it really encapsulates kind of my origin story and then all the possibilities that followed.
Mm-hmm. You talk about, 2 million people that were boat people and more, from different countries, and just that spirit of leaving where you were from to go to a new place. Why do you think this book is important for others?
I hope that it will resonate with others because we live in the United States of America, and I think the fabric of what makes our country great and strong is its diversity. We are not a homogenous country. We have 50 states with 50 identities and flags and, mottos. And I think that when you bring people from all over the world together in a place like America, where merit is often rewarded, where hard work can get you really far, where you're not necessarily born into a caste system, where there are a lot of opportunities for a lot of people, that is truly where innovation is born. That is where we get new ideas. That is how we enrich who we are. And I'm so grateful that I work in a profession that allows me to ask questions, that, I get an excuse to ask questions and to be curious and to be nosy and to interrogate people. And I carry that into my personal life because I do find people and their stories fascinating. And I think you can always learn something from someone. And I heard this phrase recently from someone I work with, Angie Lassman, and she said she had heard it somewhere, but it was like, say the extra sentence or ask the extra question in your everyday encounters in real life. And I love this because I think we are all walking around too much with our head buried in our phones or just kind of distracted. And so when you're at the coffee shop or you step into the elevator or you encounter someone, it's like you say that extra sentence, you ask that extra question. You never know where that conversation is going to lead and how it might enrich your life, and that connection might be formed that enables you to build your network. So I do hope that what people get from the book is a sense of our shared connections and the incredible possibilities that we all have access to living here in America.
I think that recognition part is so interesting. A lot of people may have an experience where they left a country and came somewhere else. But many may just have the experience that their head's down and they're not really thinking about what they have. And I think you talking about, recognizing that maybe you didn't want to take things for granted and you were going to attack life. A lot of it comes down to these choices. And I think about the choice, whether you, again, were born here or you weren't, just to dig in. And I wonder about a word, grit. And I wonder about what that word might mean to you. If you think about, your story, your past, your parents, but how does that word have meaning for you?
I saw nothing but grit growing up. My parents were not big on telling and talking and sharing stories. That's not a real Asian approach to parenting. It's more of a, we tell you what you need to do. We trust in the system to educate you on the things we're not going to talk to you about. But my parents modeled a lot for me. And grit is something I saw time and again, even when I didn't know what grit meant. But it just meant you keep going. You don't let things stop you. My dad opened the first Vietnamese American-owned furniture store in Santa Rosa in the 1980s. And he knew nothing about furniture, just that his friend was like, you should get into the furniture business because I'm in the furniture business. At the time, my parents were in San Jose, which was about 2 hours south of Santa Rosa, which is in Sonoma County, and they were running a food truck in Silicon Valley before food trucks were cool. They were driving around and feeding all of the people working at these various silicon wafer factories, before there were, beautiful cafeterias, before there was Google. It was people lined up in a parking lot waiting for that white food truck to come and, give them the spaghetti or the burger or the burrito that they wanted. And they had 20 minutes to eat it and get back inside. My parents are running a food truck. They're done with that. They don't want to do that anymore. My dad hears his buddy is selling furniture and he's like, okay, why don't I go to Santa Rosa where there are hardly any Vietnamese people, and I'm going to get into the furniture business. And he sees a store near some other furniture businesses. So he's like, that's probably a good location because when people are looking for furniture, they might come across the street to my store. Empty building. I think the rent at the time was $1 a square foot. And my dad said he went to the owner and was like, could I lease your building? I'd like to start a furniture store. And the guy was like, and who are you? And do you have any references? And what's your credit history? And my dad was like, yeah, he didn't have any of that. So the guy was like, yeah, no, not happening. My dad goes back. He sees this, this vacant space. It's still open. Couple weeks later. After he badgered the guy for, I think, a few months, the guy finally was like, okay, fine, open your furniture store. But I just saw my parents every time somebody said no or, they encountered an obstacle, they just kind of kept going. And they didn't take it personally, and they didn't question whether it was because of their immigrant status or their identity. They just found a way through, over, and around obstacles. And I think by just watching them doing that, it taught me to persevere as well.
So, if you think about the traits that we really cheer on right now, courage, grit, resilience, boldness, bravery, and then you think about what it took to leave your country and come somewhere else and just be willing to, whatever came, you were going to get through it. I think that's just such a powerful quality. And it doesn't need to be just, expressed by those who had to leave. It's something that we can all grab hold of and almost find the spirit of. And I think that that's what's really cool about the way you tell the story of leaving a country so young, but also, being able to access these opportunities that you have here. You've had this ability to go into some fascinating places and ask some fascinating questions. And I almost just want to dig into some of your takeaways. And I'm curious what's been popping up for you for your work. Do you mind if we kind of dive into a little bit of some of the stuff you've been uncovering through your work? I think this is just fascinating stuff that a lot of people are interested in. You've done some inquiry around kind of what do we need to know about raising the next generation. Can you give us some tips on that?
I'm so fascinated because I am a mom of 3 daughters. They're 15, 13, and 8. They're growing up so fast, so quickly, in a time where everything also seems to be moving at warp speed. I would not proclaim myself an expert in raising the next generation, but I will say I've gotten to speak to many people who are experts. And one of the areas that I have focused on in my reporting is exposure to screens and social media. And it has taught me so much about myself as an adult, but also the impact that screens are having on young people whose brains are developing. We were recently at Cincinnati Children's Hospital and talked to 3 leading researchers who have launched this massive, incredible study looking at children from age 0, and they're hoping to follow them all the way through 18. But they're 5 years into the study. They brought back a little 5-year-old girl, and they did an MRI, like they screened her brain when she was a newborn, and now they're screening it again. And they're comparing that to what her parents say in terms of how much screen time she's exposed to each day, social media, what have you. And so they're hoping to better understand how exposure to screens affects children's brains. The biggest takeaway I have from this very early stage of their study is they are all saying 0 screens for ages 0 to 3 years. That actually goes beyond the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation of no screens between 0 and 2. And I asked them, is there a difference between like videos that claim to be educational or YouTube channels that say they're educational, versus like television or movies or, your tablets or your phones? And they said there is no evidence that screens help educate children at all, and that there is plenty of evidence that interacting with the parent and having a parent look at the baby, read to the baby, talk to the baby, those are all the ways that kids develop socially and emotionally, and that their brains form more connections when they are spoken to by their parents and caregivers. And that to me was so important because I see so many kids ages 3 and under that are already have a phone in their face, a tablet in their face, they're at dinner, they're in a stroller, they're on an airplane. I'm not a perfect parent. I for sure have relied on screens to get through a long flight. But I realize that when you are exposing your children to screens at an early age, it changes how their brains develop. It changes how they move through life, and potentially they don't have the kind of attention span that you may hope that they have. They may not have the same problem-solving skills. They may not interact with people in the same way, because they said what fires together, wires together. Meaning, if you are exposed to lots of different stimulus in the real world, then that's what your brain will look for and accept. If you are constantly just looking at a 2-dimensional screen, then your brain is going to become receptive to just that kind of reward. And the programming that kids are experiencing today is very different than the program you and I grew up with, like the Sesame Street or the more simple cartoons. Lots of content that is designed to go on a phone or a tablet now is designed to be highly addictive. the colors, the flashing, even the eye tracking that tells the makers of these programs where your eyes are at any given time. And so for me, in talking to other parents just out in the real world in my own community, something I always try to tell people is try to give your kids the best childhood that you can in the real world. Being bored is okay. Being outside by yourself is okay. Doing whatever you can to stave off their exposure to screens. They will have a whole lifetime of screens. Give them a childhood first. And then, I don't know if you want me to go into social media, but that's like a whole nother.
No, I mean, this is fascinating. I mean, I'm 44. I don't have kids, but one of the things that's been so fascinating about going through the last decade or more with my friends is that there's this phrase that feels like pops up in every household around screen time, and it's like this negotiation that it's almost a universal thing. It feels like, and it sounds like there's a lot of research now coming out around that screen time, and probably something that a lot of us should kind of perk our ears up to. Are there any tips that you've learned from parents who have had success trying to, I don't know, move their children further away from the screen?
Yeah, I think real world parents have given me advice, and I've gotten advice from experts as well. And I think the key with the screen time is, as much as you can, limit it. And then if you are, if your child is engaging in screen time, what kind of show is it? Is it something designed to foster conversation? Is it something you can sit alongside them and talk about? Community screen time is not as detrimental as one-on-one screen time, where kids are just in front of a screen for hours at a time, and it's really very one way. That kind of reinforces popcorn brain, meaning that you want to see a short video and get to the next thing and get to the next thing. It is very much designed to keep you on a loop and a cycle of addiction. And you'll see kids even experiencing withdrawal symptoms when you take those screens away. So I would say for parents to have a realistic conversation with their kids. Well, first, the first tip is avoid screens as much as you can for as long as you can. Give yourself some grace as a parent. If you have to park your kid in front of a TV show so you can get dinner made, that's okay. That's very different than giving them their own iPad or phone to babysit them. That is what experts would recommend against. It's never too late to turn it back or to dial it down. Parents will say, well, I've already given them the smartphone. I've already given them the social media. What am I supposed to do? The experts would say, you set boundaries. You set time limits. You take away some of the apps. Your kids will survive, and they will find other things to do. The third most important tip, I think, is to find community. It is so much easier to do this when you have a group of parents who've all agreed, let's try to take the same approach. Let's wait until 8th grade. There's a movement. Wait until 8th to give your kid a smartphone. I love that. Wait until 16 to let them on social media. When you find a community and your kid isn't the only one, that'll definitely make it easier.
I find your work so cool. It feels like you get to just dig into these hot button issues. And
I feel so lucky.
No
yes,
kidding.
For sure.
No kidding. I'm thinking about another hot button, finances. And I'm curious what you're learning about financial security and debt nowadays.
I am learning that a lot of people have credit card debt, and I am telling them it's okay, that you should not be ashamed if you are in debt of any kind. You should not blame yourself, but you do need to step up and take responsibility to climb out of that debt. It is financial quicksand to be in credit card debt. Credit card interest rates are at their highest levels in history. In some cases, 25% or more. That means for every $100 you put on a credit card, if you don't pay it off in full, you're going to pay back $125. Nobody can get out of that. That is the definition of financial quicksand. I talked about that on the Today Show, and I felt like it was the perfect metaphor for what's happening to people. So I would say the biggest tip that I have for people when it comes to money is pay off your credit card debt as soon as you can, whether that means consolidating it to a zero balance credit card, trying to take out a personal loan where the interest rates might be lower. Budgeting, super important. Cutting back on the things you don't need to spend money on. I grew up in a family where we weren't poor, but we weren't spending money all the time on coffee and takeout food delivery and things that we didn't necessarily need. And it taught me about needs versus wants. So I would say for folks to really look at their budget, see what money is coming in, what money is going out, and you would be surprised at how much money might be going out to things that you might not miss and could go towards paying down debt. Because as soon as you don't have that debt, it's like a weight is lifted off your shoulders. You have so much more freedom and so much less stress, and getting into those smart money habits will serve you so well in the long run.
It's interesting that, the research you've done into finances, that the first thing that you talked about was credit cards. That there's, probably lots of topics you could go into, but that feels like that real start to financial quicksand. Is that what you called it? I thought that was, what a term. I'm putting you on the spot with this, but I'm curious, we've talked about screen time, we've talked about finances and credit cards. Is there anything else that you've come across in your investigations that feels like, people need to know this?
I'm really fascinated right now with a number of consumer health issues, among them being artificial ingredients in food dyes, as well as microplastics. Microplastics meaning, the chemicals that go into making plastics, as well as the actual plastic particles that are like all around us and also inside of us, literally inside of our organs, our tissues, our brains. The increasing research on plastic and how it is disrupting the human body is fascinating to me. And so we have a few stories that we are working on just to first make people aware of the amount of plastic that you're breathing in and that you are actually ingesting. Because plastic production has ramped up so much in the past 50 to 70 years. It didn't used to be that all your zucchinis and blueberries and cucumbers came wrapped in plastic. It didn't used to be that all the carpet fibers and clothing that you were wearing was made with plastic fibers that are constantly sloughing off into the air that you breathe. And it didn't used to be that you ordered a ton of hot food in plastic takeout containers. But we are doing all of those things now. And those chemicals that are used to make plastics, as I'm learning from the experts, are big-time hormone disruptors. And hormone disruptors can lead to things like infertility, disease, cancer. For me, being aware of what's in the environment that could lead to personal health issues is super important. And I want to make people not scared. I want people to feel empowered. Like, oh, okay, so here are ways that I can cut down on my own plastics exposure and consumption. And same when it comes to artificial ingredients. Here in America, our food laws are not nearly as strict as they are in other countries. And ingredients that are literally banned in other countries are allowed in our food products, sometimes from the same food manufacturer. I think that's outrageous. So I want people to demand better when it comes to their food safety and their food quality. And I want people to know what they can purchase and what they can avoid to better their health.
I could feel myself cringing as you were talking about plastics in our organs and our brains. And I think I kind of know that. And I also don't want to know that. It feels like it's so hard to reconcile what that actually means. But
and that's where I come in, because I will say I've met some people and they're like, oh no, I've ruined food for my family, or I've ruined plastics for my family. But joking aside, it's true. When you know, you can't unknow. And I don't want people to panic, and I don't want people to feel like, well, then I have to just go live in a bubble. It's simple things. It's literally using wooden or stainless steel utensils instead of plastic utensils. It's using a reusable water bottle when you can, instead of accepting all of the plastic water bottles. Not only is that better for your health, it's also better for the environment. It's, if you want to go the extra mile, bringing your own glass containers when you go out to a restaurant. If you know you're the kind of person who always has leftovers and is like, oh, can I take that home? Just bring your own little glass container and you can take that stuff home. You don't have to go to the extremes, but now that you know, these are things that not only are gonna be better for your health, they're also gonna save you money when you're reusing things. Or just when you're at the store picking up produce, you're just gonna put it in the cart. You don't need to put it in another plastic bag to bring home that you're just gonna throw away, right? You're gonna wash that fruit when you get home. These are small things that I've learned from researchers and scientists about how they live their lives. That's the coolest thing, is when you get to do these kinds of stories and talk to these subject matter experts, you're like, well, doctor, what do you do in your life when it comes to plastics? And they tell you, well, I don't buy coffee every day because those paper cups are all lined with plastic to keep that hot beverage from disintegrating the paper cup. But that hot beverage is leaching all kinds of nanoparticles and plastic chemicals into the tea or coffee. So I just make my own and I bring it in a reusable mug. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. That's an easy alternative fix, right? If I have to get a coffee when I'm out and about traveling, I will. I don't live super strictly, but I like to know best practices, and I like to know the best practices from the experts. And then I like to share them with my audience.
You mentioned this kind of quality, maybe I'm putting the word out there, but it's almost this like trailblazing quality that's been part of your career, and also maybe been part of, I don't know how maybe the way your parents grew and had their time be expressed in the States. What does it take to be a bit of a trailblazer in your mind?
To be a trailblazer, I think it takes being willing to go for something because you genuinely believe in it and you genuinely will put the hard work in to get there. I think that you won't know that you're trying to blaze a new trail when you're doing it necessarily. That's never been the case for me. I never set out and said, I'm going to blaze a trail here. I think I just trusted my gut, and I thought if there's a will, there's a way. I definitely think that comes from a refugee immigrant mentality, because when you don't have to think too far ahead, when you're not worried about things in the past, when you're just looking at what's right in front of you and what is the right decision in this moment, and you go for it, that will lead to the next good thing. I've always believed that. I think we're all born with an instinct and a gut and an intuition. And too often we let other people paper over or bury our own instincts. And I think that when you allow those voices to shut you down, it blocks you from your full potential. So I would just say it's great. If you can clearly say, I want to blaze a new trail here and do this new thing, awesome if you know that. But even if you don't, listen to yourself. Listen to what it is that you love to do, that you find yourself lighting up when you think about, and then just go and try to be the best at that thing.
I think about the reach that we have. There's a lot of 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds that listen to us, and lots of them are thinking, I want to make that next step happen, and they don't really know where to start. And it sounds like, there's probably a lot to that answer, but there's a first step to that answer. And it feels like that really does, trailblazing oftentimes comes down to that first step.
Most definitely. I would say that I made a vision board once and I was like, oh, this is kind of woo-woo, I'm not sure. But I look back on those little magazine pictures and words that I cut out and pasted onto a board, and many of them have come true. Many of them, in a way where you're like, is this magic? What is this? And I think people talk about manifesting things and attracting things and visualizing your goals. And I actually truly believe that it's okay to write that stuff down, put a picture of it up, say it out loud, say it into the world, say it to yourself. Why not? You have nothing to lose. Put those goals out there and think about, what am I doing today that's going to move me one step closer to that goal? Whether it's writing an email, picking up the phone, meeting someone, adding to your network, talking to a friend or a colleague about this thing that you want to do. You kind of never know where your next connection is going to come from that could help you move closer to that goal. So if you're talking about it and you're taking steps towards it, I think like that's the first one, is just to say it out loud, or to put up a picture board and just say, this is something I really love and want to do and believe in and want to work toward. Just the simple act of putting that one phrase out there, I think, brings you a step closer to your goal.
The power of a dream is extraordinary. And then to bring that dream down to today and just say, what's the first step towards that? And what's cool about, Boat Baby, I feel like you've put your finger on a storyline of dreams that lots of people have had for generations. And you kind of touch on it, and you're living it. I mean, you're a journalist for NBC. I mean, can you describe your journey and what it must feel like to be in that role?
I will say I am grateful every day. And something that I do think about often are the incredible things I get to do. Reese Witherspoon posted a video, and I think she got it from another actor, but it was this idea that when you wake up in the morning and you're like, ugh, I have to go to work. Ugh, I have to walk to the train station. I have to go to school. I have to work out. If you change the word I have to I get to, what a mind shift. What a complete flipping of the script. I get to go to work. I get to walk to the train station. I get to work out. I say that to my daughters when they're like, I have to go to school, I have to take a test. You get to go to school. You get to take a test to show what you've learned, to show how your studying has paid off. But I think making those little adjustments in our lives in how we look at what's coming our way and what we are pursuing, mindset is everything.
I'm curious, what came first for you? So this ability to kind of mindset flip. I mean, it's such a powerful tool in life. Do you think that came because of your experience going back to Vietnam when you were young? Or do you think that that's just something that's been in you?
Oh, no. I mean, I definitely think I'm always looking for ways to improve myself. I am a feedback vacuum. Like, what is it called when you just want all the information? That's how I feel. I'm relentless about seeking feedback from people, and I want the bad stuff. I want you could have done this better. I want to hear where I can grow. I'm okay, I think, with understanding generally what I'm good at doing. I want to hear what I could improve on. And I know that not everybody is that relentless in seeking feedback. And I know that not everybody is great about receiving feedback. But I think like anything else, it's a learned skill. You can get better. You can also remember to take it or leave it. You can seek all the feedback in the world. It's up to you to figure out what's valuable and what you want to hold on to and work on. And what is, thanks for that, but I'm going to leave it there. So I think when you look for feedback and you look for self-growth, you are rewarded.
I feel like this is almost a theme in your work as a investigative correspondent, looking into almost like little takeaways that people can have in life, this feedback that people can have in life, and kind of like exploring stories that then leave these takeaways for people. What would you say are some of the most impactful, at a broad level, the most impactful smart takeaways that you've had from your work?
Broadly, one of the things I have learned from a career in journalism, and it's pushing 25 years now, and I don't think any of my children will become journalists, and that's okay with me. But one thing I do want them to take with them into any career that they pursue is to be curious. I am so grateful I get paid to be curious, but even if I didn't, I think it's a trait that I inherit from my dad, who has asked a million questions in his life. I mean, everywhere we go, he's always asking questions. And he's also taught me that if no is the first answer, sometimes you got to ask again and again just to find out, like, what exactly are the rules, or what exactly could we get? And is this no for like everything, or is this no for just a couple of things? But I think that curiosity and not being shy about asking questions, it has helped me so much. And it's even about difficult topics, like people don't want to talk about race or politics or some of those sensitive topics. But I find that when you are asking with genuine intention, and you do ask because you want to learn and because you just want to know where that person's coming from, it is kind of the most enriching thing you can do. We don't have to be in school to learn. We can learn from the school of life. And we live in a country where you are allowed to ask questions of people who are in powerful positions, people who are your peers, people who you might be mentoring. I think that asking questions and being curious is something I have learned from my job. The biggest takeaway from me is if you don't know, ask. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no shame in the game. And same with asking for help. I was talking to someone and they said, something they wish they had learned earlier in their lives was just like, it's okay to ask for help. I ask for help all the time. I was like, oh, that is not a challenge for me. I have always known that I'm not the smartest person in the room. I have always known that there are people better than I am at many, many, many things. So I just find that person, whether it's in my classroom and we're doing a group project, or it's in my workplace and we've got some sort of assignment and I have no idea how to do it. I just go and figure out who is the subject matter expert, and then I hitch my little wagon to them. And I think people like to be of help. They like to share their expertise. That's always been my experience. And then the ones that sometimes you come across that don't really want to help, okay, that's okay. You'll find someone else.
There's this really interesting quality when I was looking into your story, and then even just in your answers so far. You talk about curiosity. I also see this like fearlessness that's within you, where it feels like you just go and you're willing to ask questions and you're willing to go into places. And part of it reminds me of, we just had an interview with a high performance coach, and he was talking about those who are the highest performers in the world are truth seekers. They're just willing, they're not worried about, is this going to hurt my feelings, or they're just wanting to uncover that data. And it feels like it's hard to know like what comes first. Does the ability to ask those questions come first? Does it fearlessness comes first? Or, but it seems like there's this part of your story that you've just been able to be a trailblazer. And it kind of feels like the spirit of the book as well. I don't know if that's just an outside observation or if that's something that resonates with you.
Wow, Tyler, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for like all these great questions and these insights and observations that you're making, because some of this is not at all how I view myself or how I would describe myself. But I will say that when you do something a lot, of course, you lose your fear about doing it. Of course, you gain more confidence in doing it. And so sometimes just doing that, like I would encourage anyone who's not necessarily feeling confident about asking questions and being inquisitive in their classroom or their workplace, start with just one or two questions. Start with one or two people that you think will be receptive to a question. And then that's kind of how you're going to build your confidence. And you're going to realize more often than not, people have interesting things to say when you ask them questions. And when you are motivated by a genuine desire to learn what they have to say. Don't ask a question just for a question's sake. I think people can detect disingenuousness, or they can detect when you're being a faker. But when you come in, and I have had this when I'm asking people about race, when I am asking people about why they have a certain political belief, I ask with a genuine curiosity, not because I want to convince them of the way I think or my views, but because I want to know where they're coming from. And then I might share with them, if they ask me, where I'm coming from. And I find that it usually never happens in that moment that you're going to change someone's mind or everyone's going to have a kumbaya moment. But I find that for me, a week or a month later, I'm thinking about that person and what they said, and it has affected me. It has widened my worldview. And I can only hope that by sharing what I'm thinking and my experiences, that it will have widened their worldview. And I feel like today, when people are really polarized and sometimes feel like they're when people feel a sense of despair about what all might be happening in the big world, I think when you're looking in your own sphere of influence and you're talking to the people that you talk to in real life and you're asking questions and you're seeking understanding, you feel less alone, you feel more connected, and you have more hope, because I guarantee we have more in common than what divides us. And in my book, Boat Baby, that is a theme for me too. A family sponsored us from halfway around the world that had nothing in common with us. There's like a family in Oregon, who was sponsoring a family from Vietnam. And yet we come here and we bond, we share laughs, we share community. We recognize that everybody just wants a good, safe life for their kids, for their family. And you want to get along with your neighbors, and you want to feel like you're of service, and you want to feel like you matter. And those are universal themes for any human being.
I think a lot of us need to hear that right now. Just, what brings us together? What brings us together? What's been interesting is, right at the start of this conversation, you were saying, you don't think about yourself. Like, you're asking questions of others, and it's been kind of a fun experience for you to be asked questions of your own story. And I'm curious, if we go think about your process of writing the book, what were the takeaways about yourself as you were going through that experience?
I definitely learned that I'm super impatient, and also that I am, for better or worse, not someone who plans a lot. And thankfully, I am married to a partner who has very different and balancing characteristics to my own impulsivity and decisiveness. But I learned that I'm not one to fret too much about the past, and I'm also not one to worry, some might say, think too much about the future. Living in the present has served me well, and I find it to be easier. Gosh, it's so hard to think about the future because the future is full of so many possibilities, and also the future's not promised. So why am I living there? And then as far as the past, I make mistakes. I'm very quick to apologize, actually. I think that is a positive quality, that if I screw something up or I have wronged someone, I show up and I make that known, and I do anything I can to make sure that I try to make amends on that, and I try to take that responsibility, and then I let it go. And I feel the same way about if someone has wronged me. It's easier said than done, but I think if you practice it a lot, it becomes easier. I don't hold on too much to things and how someone has wronged me. And like, I can let go of things pretty easily. So that I learned as I was reflecting on the book, as I was writing about the things I've been through, the things my parents have been through, some of the challenges and conflicts that I have had with my family, because family is messy. I realized, like, I don't hold on to things, and I think that's good.
One of the things that stands out for me when I see people who are working busy jobs and also completing a project. So I know that a book is a mountain, and there's almost a few mountains with it. There's the writing, and then there's all the process that comes after. What did you learn about managing projects while you're already busy, or the burnout that might come from those type of projects?
Ooh, I learned it takes a village, and anyone who seems like they're succeeding and just going for it and doing things by themselves, that is a mirage. Either you haven't asked them how they're doing it, or they're not being truthful about how they're doing it. I have two parents that are very involved in my kids' lives. They get them to and from school. They make school lunches. They make sure that, if somebody has to come home early from an activity, they're there. I know that phrase, it takes a village, when you're talking about juggling family and career. And sometimes when you're doing an outside project, it feels like a whole nother second full-time or part-time job. So I would say the way that I manage burnout is by leaning on my village. And I think that having a strong partner or having good people in your life that you can lean on is the greatest blessing. And going to people who, have expertise in areas so that you can be efficient. I will say, when I had a whole consumer team here, and they were laid off in January of 2024, a year and a half ago. And I will say that was probably one of my lowest points of my career and the most stressful times, because I was worried for them as human beings with families and responsibilities. And the workload was pretty high at the time without them. And I didn't know exactly what was going to happen next. And I would say I definitely felt the stress of all of that happening at once. And it was really helpful to be able to talk about it with my husband. And we talked about it a lot. We would go on dog walks and I would just talk and he would listen. So I think having partners and people in your life to lean on is one of the best ways to help relieve you of that burnout. And to also remember that you're a person, and to give yourself some grace, and that things aren't, thankfully in my job, things are not life and death. So I try to keep perspective.
I think this is what you do. You touch on topics that are, near and dear to people, but it feels like so many of the things you've touched on today, I think have caught a lot of people and had them kind of see themselves either in fresh light or just kind of pause on something that they haven't been pausing on before. You're so good at learning lessons. What would you say has been the lesson that's taken you the longest to learn?
I love this question. And I think there's a chapter in Boat Baby that sums it up well. The chapter is called The Hot Intern. And it took me until about my mid to late 20s to learn this lesson. And it was the lesson that you shouldn't compare and despair. That there will always be someone who is younger than you, prettier than you, smarter than you, more pedigreed than you. But there will never be a person who is better than being you than you, right? Like, there's nobody that's going to be a better Tyler or a better Vicky than Tyler and Vicky. So I recognized that when I had this intern. I kid you not, she was a pageant winner, like a Miss County or a Miss State something. And up until she came into my life, I had had many interns. I had helped them shoot their tapes, their stand-ups. I had stood outside in the super hot Phoenix sun to coach them, to tell them, hey, say it like this, move your hands like this, try that again, like pick up this thing. I really took pride in having my little interns and like making sure they got the best tape or the best reel, out of that experience. Then I had this intern, blonde, blue-eyed, gorgeous, like stunning. And I remember she went out with me a few times, and I would definitely suggest that she go shoot the stand-up, but I wasn't doing the extra thing that I did with the other interns. I wasn't going the extra step to really, really help her. And then, she was there for a couple months, she left. And when she left, I distinctly remember feeling like a real jerk, like worse than a jerk, like an a-hole. I was like, wow, what was that all about? I really was like, I didn't like the feeling that it left me with, that I wasn't as helpful to this person. I wasn't as kind. I wasn't as mentoring or nurturing. And then I recognized, oh, it's because I was jealous. I thought she was so pretty and I thought she would be fine in the world. And I was like, I don't need to help her. I did not like that. I thought that was so ugly of me and I hated how it made me feel. And it wasn't until she left that I recognized it. And then ever since then, I was like, yeah, I do not ever want to treat anybody like that again. I need to just step it up. Like I don't need to be threatened by people. I need to recognize they're running their own race. They're doing their own thing. What their success doesn't take away from my success. And so ever since that intern, I just took a different tact in working with people. Even if I was like, wow, this person's like so good, or they're just, amazing. I just realized like, if the slot is meant for me, I'll get it. And if it's not, I won't. And that's okay. I'm going to control what I can control, and I don't need to worry about the rest. So I definitely remember that being a lesson that I wish I'd learned younger, not to compare and despair or like let my insecurities get the better of me.
And if we think about those lessons that we probably all wish we'd learned earlier, and we think about, being 20 nowadays, and I think being 20 is such a fascinating age, and now is such a fascinating time. What advice would you give a 20-year-old who's listening to this?
I would say, go out and live your life in the 3D world as much as you can. If that means going into the office to interact with your coworkers and your boss, if that means going outside and meeting with people, joining a club, I would say put your phone down. I would say do a digital detox. I would say limit the amount of time that you spend scrolling on social media. I think that is ground zero for toxic feelings. And I would say really work on your personal network as much as you work on your professional network. If you want to have a family, if you want to have kids, especially if you're a young woman, I would say that's important, and prioritize that the same way you would prioritize going after your career. I think it is really important. Life is a team sport, and I am very grateful for the partner that I have in my life, and I hope that for my daughters too. I remember reading something in the New York Times talking about how parents were surveyed and they all say, oh, I want my child to be financially independent. I want my child to be successful in their career. And no parents were saying, I want my child to be in a happy marriage. And this article was really making the case for marriage. I would say, actually, I think it's really important. I think having someone there stabilizes you for the inevitable ups and downs of life, particularly the downs. It makes it easier to bounce back and to be resilient when you've got a teammate. And that teammate can come in whatever form. It could be a best friend, it could be, whoever. But I think that we don't put enough emphasis on the importance of having those strong partnerships. It's like, I'm successful because this is my paycheck. I'm successful because I won this award. You might be successful because you found an incredible person, and that person is going to help you become the best version of yourself. So I would just say, like, that's not the most conventional advice, but I have found it to be very true. And it is something I want my daughters to know, that like, it is important to make sure that you're open to that, and that your career is important, but like, at the end of your life, no one just looks back and says, ooh, I'm so glad about those plaques on the wall or those trophies on my stand. They're happy about the people who are around them and the people that left an impact on them and that they're leaving an impact on.
I love that idea of life teammates. I just think it connects. It makes, I can think of those people in my life who've been my teammates.
And it makes
powerful.
everything sweeter. It makes all the success that much better, and it makes all of the, tough parts that much easier to manage.
So Vicky, I'm going to, summarize this story at such a high level, but you left Vietnam when you were 8 months old, came to America, had this opportunity to really like go after things, attack life, and you've done it. You've become a journalist, work for NBC. You've just released a book, Boat Baby. What do you hope your legacy is?
Ooh, legacy, that's like a capital L, like that's a big, big word. And I wouldn't say that I am at all a person who goes around thinking about my legacy. I just don't. But I will say, as the mother of 3 daughters, I hope that what they take away from my life is that it's important to be of service. That is what will give you purpose. That's what will keep you going on the dark days, because you will know that you matter. And that purpose can be big, it can be small, but I want you to like foster it. So I want my legacy to be that being of service and making your community, whatever it may be, better is what will make you better. And so strive for that. That's where I think true happiness comes from, is having purpose and knowing that you matter. And it's not about those like outside superficial accolades. Those are nice. Those are great. Those are great things to have. But the things that truly matter are that you treated the people around you well, that you are kind, and that hopefully whatever situation you're in, you leave it better. You leave the people around you better, you leave the circumstances better, and you contributed.
And you mentioned earlier that you kind of see your role as public service, and I love that. And the way you talk about, the impact you hope to have is around service. So you've just released this book. You're already doing amazing things. What's next?
I really look forward to meeting the people who take the time and invest a chunk of their time in reading the book. That to me is a new arena for me, publishing a book, getting it out into the world, and then getting to hear what resonated with people, what people learned from it, what made them laugh. I look forward to that next, is just interacting with people based on the book. And hopefully that, it's something that my parents will be proud of eventually, or that they will be glad that it's out in the world.
Well, we'll make sure we get those links to everyone who's listening to this. And I just want to, you've taken my brain into places that it hasn't gone for a long time. And I think your ability to just like have people pause it's really impacted me through this conversation. Vicky Nguyen, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for the amazing conversation, Tyler. Thank you for asking questions that made me think really deep and reflect on things and think about my life in ways that I never had before. As an interviewer yourself, it's, one thing to ask the questions, but when you have to answer them, I don't have much practice doing that or being the subject of an interview. So thank you for making it so thoughtful and insightful and enjoyable.
Thank you.